Are you struggling to master one of Warframe's most powerful frames in the entire game? Are you struggling to have an idea of how her abilities combo and how to maximize her damage output? If so, this tutorial may just help you learn to master Mag herself and to make her one of the most powerful Warframes that you will have in your entire collection. To begin, we do need to take a look at mods. Because she is a close range character, do consider building her for such a situation. For this situation, I built her for being hit by enemies as well as being close range. This includes Retribution, which added lightning damage when she's hit, Steel Charge to increase her melee damage as well as her teammates' melee damage, Intensify to increase her ability strength, Primed Flow to increase her energy output that she has, Stretch to increase her range, Natural Talent to increase her casting speed, Constitution for increased duration as well as knockdown recovery, Vitality to increase her overall health pool, Continuity for duration, and Streamline for ability efficiency. This means that she will always be able to cast abilities, but she will have to worry a little bit about her energy pool, as her energy pool is considerably smaller than some of the other primed Warframes. To begin to really understand her, we do need to take a look at her abilities. First up is Mag's ability to pull enemies nearer with the ability Pull. It creates a magnetic force that pulls enemies toward her, allowing you to take full advantage of them being stunned while in melee range. This only lasts a few brief seconds, but if you have a good melee weapon, and even a shotgun or a weapon of the sort, she can very quickly dispatch enemy forces. Second up is her ability Magnetize. Magnetize is Mag's ability to create a magnetic field around a single target. This enrages all nearby enemies and deals damage over time. This field does react to both bullets and shrapnel created by Polarize. Now, enemy fire will be absorbed into Magnetize, increasing its damage output, so it is best used when trying to control the map, and optimized when being fired into, as well as chained with Polarize, which we are going to discuss Polarize next. Polarize is Mag's ability to emit an energy pulse that removes enemy shields and damages armor, creating shards which become deadly when mixed with Magnetize. The shields of allies who are nearby these enemies that are affected by Polarize will find that their shields will be restored upon enemies being touched by her ability. Now, one of the best things to do is remember that Polarize and Magnetize are comboed together to become extremely lethal abilities, but they can only do so by being chained together. Next up is her final ability, which is called Crush, which is Mag's ability to magnetize all enemies within the area and causing them to take insane amounts of damage, and can be used to help wipe out entire groups of enemies and even clear out the battlefield, allowing her to help friendlies, revive friendlies, or just find a break in combat. So remember that this ability is only best used when there are tons of enemies nearby. First up is Mag's ability Pull. As you saw in the damage description for the ability itself and what it does, Pull is Mag's ability to draw enemies nearby. However, even though it does have a chance to do this, you do need to know that environmental collision does exist in Warframe, and enemies can be caught against rails, they can be caught against crates, or even fixtures of any sort, allowing Mag to temporarily disable them, but not unfortunately bring her into a melee range. So definitely be aware that environmental collision does exist, and it can be problematic if you're looking for a quick melee blow or a quick shotgun blast to disable enemies. If that is something that you don't mind, you can easily stun enemies, you can easily weaken them as you go. This ability is outstandingly well done, especially since it combos very well with other Warframe abilities and even Mag's own abilities. Warframes such as Rhino, Nova, or even Inaros can take full advantage of these enemies being disabled and put into a weakened state. Rhino's Stomp, for example, will allow you to have more control over combat and possibly even eliminate enemies, while Inaros can cast Sandstorm and completely disable enemies from combat, allowing players to fully control the flow of combat itself. Now, this does not mean constantly spam pull, as enemies will seemingly recover quicker every time you do it. Next up is Magnetize, which is her ability to create a magnetic field around a single target and enraging all nearby enemies and dealing damage over time. This does draw multiple enemies into its field, especially when it is comboed with Polarize, but we will discuss that later. What you do need to know is Magnetize's damage output can be increased over time through enemy fire as well as your own fire and the shards that you create from Polarize. Again, we will discuss Polarize later, as you'll see when it is used in combat, because it is an ability that you do need to be aware of, and it is an ability that you need to be aware of how it combos with its partner ability. So, first, let's take a look at Magnetize. Let's take a look at it in combat and how it controls the ebb and flow of combat that I've been talking about, and why it is such a useful ability in its own right. To start us off, Magnetize does have to be cast when aimed directly at a target or at the vicinity of a target. As you can see here, it does create giant magnetic fields on the combat field, much like, say, Limbo's abilities that such as Chaos, where it creates these major pulses. Unlike Limbo's Chaos, however, enemies will still be fired upon. They can still take damage. However, direct fire will not hurt them as you expect, since it does pull in the bullets. It creates a much more powerful field of damage. Now, these fields do not last but just a few seconds and can be powered up continually by just shooting into them. But just note that their duration does matter, and they last approximately 20 seconds with the build I'm using. That 20 seconds is more than enough to really get an idea of what it does, but also to control combat. Next up is Polarize. As stated, Polarize is one of the most useful abilities in her entire kit, especially since it powers up Magnetize. Polarize is the one that we talked about that sends this massive pulse throughout a room, and it magnetizes enemies in its own right. This is also the ability that strips enemy shields and armor and creates shards that amplify the damage magnetized while also restoring player shields. So if you have friendlies that are low on shields, this ability is a perfect ability to take advantage of and definitely get used to, especially since it does have restorative properties in its own right, but also the fact that it amps up the damage from Magnetize, making it an extremely fun ability to use. But also it goes really well with Pull before using Magnetize. But again, we'll talk about comboing her abilities later, as that is something that you will get used to over time doing it on your own. As you can see on screen, I am going to have to use a little bit of energy restoration for the sake of this tutorial, because I am using so much energy per wave to show you these abilities. What's nice though, as you see with Polarize, it completely removed the Corpus shields, leaving them extremely vulnerable and giving me the advantage that I need in order to take them out. So, say their shields are gone and I don't have enough enemies around to really justify the use of Magnetize, I could simply throw out a wave, strip their armor, pull them near me, or even pull them towards some friendlies, and allow my teammates to dispatch them rather quickly. But you did get to see me throw out a single Magnetized orb, and there was a reason why I did that. It dispatched 2 enemies from the field of combat and allowed me to eliminate both of them. Because that ability is only useful to really demonstrate for just a few brief seconds on its own, we're going to talk about her next ability, Crush, which is her ability to fully unleash all her magnetic capabilities. Think this as her ability to go completely Magneto and Wolverine, for those of you who are X-Men fans. This is essentially what she does. It is her ability to crush all enemies nearby and rendering them completely useless while the ability is being cast. If you do want to slow down its cast time, I highly recommend removing natural talent and allowing the duration to expand so that your teammates can take advantage of the enemies being disabled and eliminating them themselves. So let's take a brief look at what Crush does. As you know, Crush is already her final and most powerful ability. This ability, as stated, lifts any enemies nearby and crushes them for an insane amount of damage. One of the best things you can do if you want to optimize this is pull enemies and then crush. It'll allow enemies to be pulled within range that were not in range originally, and it will allow you to maximize the amount of coverage that you have with this ability. Now, you do want to take note that this ability is not cheap, and you are going to be using a lot of energy for it. Just as you've seen in my tutorial several times, I've been having to use energy pads, especially because my damage output is so high, and it is so expensive to cast. Now, the one thing to take note of with the ability Crush, as you saw, was it was putting out a giant area which would envelop that zone and would crush anything within that zone. Now here we are going to take a quick look at how to maximize your damage with Magnetize and Polarize. As you saw, I had already cast Polarize once, which had stripped all enemies of their shields, and it also caused Magnetize to start drawing enemies that were not near the field the original cast period and actually take damage from it. And that is simply because they are polarized, so that Magnetize will draw them in within a certain range, and they are going to take insane amounts of damage for being caught within that area. And that is simply because they just cannot get out of it. Any enemy fire being directed at it is being pulled into the Magnetize itself, and they are steadily increasing the amount of damage that you're going to be doing. Which, as stated, is why Magnetize is such an awesome ability to have, because it does allow Mag to control the ebb and flow of combat. It does allow her to maximize her output, and it does allow her teammates to work quite well with her, especially when teammates are, say, having trouble at certain points, or the defense point is being overwhelmed, or if you're doing interception, that their zone they're trying to protect is being overwhelmed. But I do hope, ladies and gentlemen, that this tutorial has helped you understand Mag a bit better. I do hope that it has brought your interest in playing her to a whole new level, as she is such an underrated Warframe, and she is one of the most enjoyable Warframes out there. If you can get a handle on how to utilize her abilities the most, such as comboing Polarize and Magnetize, or using Pull and then Polarizing, Magnetizing, or pulling and then crushing, you will have a lot of advantage in combat, and you will have an insane amount of damage output. It's just a matter of learning how to combo her abilities, how to use her passive ability by bullet jumping and pulling in your loot to you, especially if your Sentinel has been destroyed. But that all comes with prestige, that all comes with time played. It's all a learning experience, and hopefully this tutorial has helped you do that. If you do like this tutorial, remember to hit that subscribe button down below so that you get notifications when our new videos go live. If you have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comments below, and we do look forward to hearing back from you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this tutorial helped you in some form or another. If there is any tutorials that you would like to see appear on our YouTube channel, please, again, let us know down in the comments below. Again, I'm your host, Dustin Murphy, here with Blast Away the Game Review. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.